So my proposal is an economy of genuine wealth. That means to live according to our values. Here's a new balance sheet. 5 capitals. Lots of people have talked about this before, but integrated like a flower. And we can create these conditional well-being assessments. So here are pictures of my personal wealth. This is in Jasper. That's my dad just before he sailed to New York and went through Ellis Island, came to Canada. That's my grandfather's hometown in Austria, the watershed. This is my grandfather's brother's son's house, totally off the grid, solar panels, and used 20 cubic meters of wood from the local woodlot a year. Amazing. Here's the pond. The water still comes off the Dobruch Mountains, unfiltered, and they still drink this water, just like my grandfather did 100 years ago. Here's my lovely wife, Jennifer, who I wouldn't be anything without her, and our family and our household. Household stewardship is the word economy. That's what it means in Greek. So this is our home in Edmonton. This is our garden, the places we play and walk the dog. Beautiful parks in Canada. Neighbors, going camping with the neighbors. Amazing clients like the Chinese government, where I helped them devise new indicators of well-being. They have a national policy called Chao Kang, which means a society of moderation. These are some of the top economists in China. And we greened their GDP. But China felt alone because no other country would issue the same kind of green GDP number. And my book now in China, Economics of Happiness. And John Cobb, my mentor, who with Herman Daly wrote that amazing book, For the Common Good. It was a theologian that came up with the GPI, not an economist. Drinking coffee, slow food. This is our family learning how to cook from a Sicilian cook in Tuscany, and the produce of our work, and the family dinner table, and the beautiful views of Tuscan countryside. And this in the New York Times, why do we play? Heard a lot about play. And the sunset over Lake Yellowstone. Secrets of the Good Life, Thomas Aquinas said, are 2 things. Sufficiency of material needs, which is secondary to virtuous action. There's Jefferson. Jefferson said, without virtue, happiness cannot be. But then he wrote at the end of his life, he went to a convent and he said, everything I've read and all this great summas, all this theological writing is all but straw, he said. So here's the secret formula for happiness. This is psychologist work. 50% is based on your upbringing and your genetics. This is my friend Leonard, who lived on the street for 25 years as a drug addict, Aboriginal man. The good news is only 10% of our well-being is associated with how much we make and how many PhDs you have. So there's a little Bhutan compared to the United States with a happier life satisfaction index. My daughter Renee. The good news is 40% of our happiness comes from relationships, trust, belonging. We can create economies, conditions. If I give you 1 day a week to have more time with your family as a Federal Reserve Chairman, wouldn't you elect me? And here's the system. I'm an accountant, so I think in terms of, we need income statements, we need reports to the chair. We need to resurrect the language we've lost. Value actually in Latin means to be worthy or strong. So we've got our human capital, we have our social capital, relationships, natural capital. We need to map where our food comes from. This is a map of where I live. Where the hot buttons, the red zones, are where we should be growing our food, but we have no idea what's coming off that land. This is a carbon map of Canada. This is how much our watersheds absorb in terms of carbon, or release. If it's red, it's releasing. Here's a light map of Canada. It shows our carbon intensity. And here's the carbon emissions from Canada. And I can tell you the average Canadian household has already reduced 1 ton per person in terms of something they did at home and the switch in cars. The bad news is industry has increased its emissions by creating more oil and gas for export to the United States. That's the culprit. So let me get to some just tangible examples. Here's a new balance sheet. This is for my city of Edmonton, which I created for the chief economist. Every one of those indicators has an index, a real number behind it. A perfect flower, of course, would look like a flower, but it doesn't look perfect. This is the overall composite index. And here's what's happening. Domestic violence is growing with GDP. Ecological footprint grows with GDP. But our greenhouse gas emissions are falling, which is good news. And our natural gas consumption per person is falling. So these are all good news items. But our cancer incidence is going up with GDP. Here's Santa Monica. Here's the city of Leduc, 120 indicators of well-being. Here's a perfect balance sheet. In Bhutan, they have a national policy. Here's the Prime Minister saying, personal spiritual fulfillment is not a spiritual pursuit, it is government policy. It's pretty cool. We have what France longs for. We have a Canadian Index of Well-Being already. Just our politicians haven't embraced it yet. And this is what it looks like. It's 8 domains of happiness or well-being, including time use. We have cooperative economies like Emilia-Romagna, which is the origins of the slow food movement. And we have amazing work that I'm now starting to do with Renee, connecting personal well-being psychology with virtues, through the lens of virtue, to community well-being. Here's the medicine wheel of First Nations. The Dalai Lama said, the objective of economic development must be enduring happiness. I think we need a shift in consciousness. Anyone ever read David Hawkins' work? Few. He says human consciousness goes like this curve. Well, guess where this curve comes from? Everyone recognize the numbers? It's the national debt numbers. Consciousness works parabolically, logarithmically. And Hawkins says we have moved, actually, as humanity, above the line of courage and integrity into the zone of possibility, of reason, and possibly even love. And I want to conclude on that word love, because John Paul II said, we are compelled to co-create a civilization of love. And the truth is, love is who you are.